In the opulent world of sprawling estates, designer gowns, and bank accounts with more zeros than you can imagine, appearances can be as deceptive as they are dazzling. Welcome to the twisted tale of Alexander Montgomery, a millionaire whose polished image belies the turbulent secrets lurking beneath the marble floors of his Beverly Hills mansion. A mistress in a pristine white dress emerges from the shadows, intent on capturing both his heart and his fortune. Meanwhile, his pregnant wife, draped in black like an avenging angel, has her own designs on burying them all. Prepare yourself for betrayal, obsession, and an ending that no one sees coming. Twilight draped the Los Angeles skyline in a gentle purple haze, every glass tower twinkling under the final rays of a dying sun. In the heart of this luminous city stood the Montgomery estate, a modern architectural marvel of steel glass and limestone perched atop the rolling hills of Beverly Crest. From the outside, it was everything anyone could dream of. Pristine lawns, an Olympian-sized swimming pool that glittered like liquid sapphire, and a sweeping driveway lined with carefully curated palm trees. Yet behind the estate's immaculate gates lay a household brimming with secrets and tension. Alexander Montgomery, known to business associates simply as Alex, had made a name for himself in the tech industry before leaping into real estate investments. He was featured on the cover of Forbes last year, proclaiming him one of the youngest self-made millionaires on the West Coast, a Harvard dropout with a vision that rivaled the likes of Elon Musk. Alex turned his small startup into a Silicon Valley powerhouse. The word failure never seemed to exist in his dictionary. Inside the estate, Alex's wife, Serafina Montgomery, moved through the grand halls with a delicate hand resting on her growing belly. At 6 months pregnant, her figure remained as elegant as ever, clothed in a simple black maternity gown, tailored to perfection. Serafina was once a celebrated fashion model whose face had graced the covers of Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. After marrying Alexander, she had stepped out of the spotlight to focus on family life philanthropy and supporting her husband's ambitions. But the glow in Serafina's eyes that had once charmed the fashion world had begun to dim. Rumors of her husband's infidelity gnawed at her peace of mind. Whispers in the estate from the housekeeping staff to the stables hinted that a mysterious woman had been seen frequenting Alex's private office late into the night. Serafina's best friend, Vanessa Stein, had spotted them at an upscale restaurant in Malibu not long ago. At first, Serafina dismissed these stories as malicious gossip. However, a woman's intuition is rarely wrong. That evening, as Serafina rested in an ornate drawing room, she clutched her smartphone, scrolling through social media posts from her modeling days. She paused at a photograph of her and Alexander at a runway event, both of them radiant, unstoppable, and madly in love. Her throat tightened at the memory. "I can't let this go on," she murmured softly, one hand pressed to her growing belly, a swirl of apprehension merged with fierce resolve. She had always believed that love required work, compromise, and forgiveness. However, if the rumors were true that Alex had a mistress, she would do whatever it took to protect her child's future. Beyond the estate's glass walls, a sleek Mercedes-Benz pulled up to the gate. At that very moment, behind tinted windows, the figure of a woman dressed entirely in white came into view. Little did she know every move she made was setting the stage for an explosive drama that would change all their lives forever. Alexander Montgomery was a man who thrived in the spotlight. Even before his fortune skyrocketed, he had an indefinable charisma that turned heads wherever he went. It wasn't just his striking appearance, tall athletic build and chiseled features, but his unwavering confidence that captured people's attention. During a round of golf at the Los Angeles Country Club, he could be found discussing complicated mergers while sinking birdies, his easy grin fooling onlookers into thinking he was simply enjoying a leisurely afternoon. As one of the city's most sought-after entrepreneurs, Alex was often invited to high-profile events and lavish soirees. Red carpets and VIP galas were second nature to him. He found himself shoulder to shoulder with celebrities like Jennifer Aniston at the Beverly Hills Hotel, or shaking hands with fellow tech maven Elon Musk at private fundraisers. His brand of wealth was discreet yet undeniable. Hand-stitched Italian suits, a Mont Blanc pen tucked into his breast pocket, and a minimalist Patek Philippe watch that gleamed under the camera flashes at charity dinners. But beneath the veneer of this enviable existence was a gnawing sense of restlessness. Business expansions, international deals, and philanthropic ventures kept Alex busy enough to appear fulfilled. Yet the more he achieved, the more he felt something intangible slipping through his fingers. Power and money had been his twin obsessions since leaving Harvard, but after reaching the pinnacle of success, he faced a restless emptiness he could not name. In the early days of his marriage to Serafina, Alex believed he had found a true partner, a woman who matched his ambition and refined his rough edges. She was his anchor when he found himself on the brink of exhaustion, juggling endless board meetings and product launches. However, somewhere along the way, perhaps around the time the business soared to dizzying new heights, he lost track of what truly mattered. He still cared for Serafina, but their worlds had begun to drift apart, driven by different schedules, different pressures and different confidences. Friends warned him in half-joking tones to watch out for gold diggers who might try to charm him for money. But if there was a vulnerability in Alex, it was not for cheap opportunists. He craved attention and excitement, something that whispered of danger and risk, the same impulses that fueled his empire building. And that was precisely how Camille Davenport slithered into his life, offering him the very thrill that was missing. Serafina had always been the embodiment of poise and grace, someone who brightened any room with her presence. Yet to Alex, that familiarity became routine, and routine was the opposite of the entrepreneurial adrenaline he so craved. Camille presented a spark, a forbidden fruit. It was this lure that began to overshadow the marital vows he had once cherished. So even as the cameras flashed around him and the tabloids hailed him as an icon of success, Alexander Montgomery was a man caught in a whirlpool of his own cravings and guilt. It was only a matter of time before his carefully constructed facade would buckle under the weight of secrets and betrayal. Camille Davenport was a name that had circulated in certain elite circles long before she turned her gaze toward Alexander Montgomery. Born in a small town in Illinois, she reinvented herself with a zeal few could match. She relocated to Los Angeles in her early 20s, determined to carve out a life far grander than anything she had left behind. With striking green eyes, cascading honey-blonde hair, and a body honed by daily Pilates sessions, Camille could shift effortlessly between demure and seductive, depending on her audience. She first dabbled in modeling, though never reaching the echelon Serafina once commanded. Her foray into acting amounted to bit parts in TV shows' easily forgotten roles, but where Camille truly excelled was in navigating the labyrinth of wealthy men who frequented LA's high society. She became a regular at the same exclusive clubs, private members-only lounges, and A-list parties that the city's elite adored. While some pegged her as just another social climber, few realized the cold, calculating mind hiding beneath the pretty exterior. Camille's ambition was single-minded, to ascend into the highest echelons of society, by any means necessary. She had learned early on that, while beauty opened doors, cunning kept them open. Whether it was reading up on a potential benefactor's favorite hobbies or feigning genuine interest in philanthropic causes, Camille meticulously researched her targets before making a move. The unpredictability of a man like Alexander Montgomery was exactly the challenge that thrilled her. Their paths first crossed at a charity gala in Bel Air for children's cancer research. Camille arrived alone, looking like a vision in a white silk gown, a contrast to the sea of black tie outfits around her. She spotted Alexander easily. He was the center of attention, exuding confidence as he laughed and chatted with the city's most influential figures. Timing her approach to appear spontaneous, Camille accidentally bumped into him at the bar. The moment their eyes met, she flashed a careful blend of vulnerability and charm. She knew the game well. "Well, hello there," she said, with a disarming smile, letting her fingertips graze his hand as she reached for a cocktail napkin. Alexander turned to look at her, momentarily caught off guard by the intensity of her gaze. Their connection was instantaneous, an electric jolt of curiosity on both sides. Over the course of the evening, they exchanged banter about the charity cause, art, and travel. She mentioned her recent trip to the Amalfi Coast, fabricated details sprinkled among real facts to enthrall him. By the end of the night, Alex found himself both intrigued and bewitched. Camille's white gown became the symbol of her purity in Alexander's eyes, a stark contrast to the moral ambiguity coursing through their conversation. He did not suspect that this same woman would soon become the biggest threat to his marriage, and quite possibly to his entire empire. Camille had found her mark, and she intended to strike with precision. Life at the Montgomery estate evolved as if under an invisible countdown. The staff sensed a tension in the air that they could not fully articulate. Serafina walked the corridors with an unspoken heaviness, while Alexander's demeanor grew increasingly distracted. Meetings ran later. Business trips stretched longer. The hush that followed whenever Serafina entered a room felt charged with anxious speculation. Despite her husband's claimed innocence, when confronted with sly questions, "I'm just swamped with work, dear," he'd say. Serafina's instincts screamed otherwise. Every time Alex's phone buzzed and he rushed to check the screen, her heart clenched. She tried to maintain composure, but the sense of betrayal chiseled away at her serenity. Her unborn child was now her priority, and she refused to tolerate illusions that could harm her growing family. One afternoon, during a light rain that slicked the estate's manicured gardens, Serafina decided to investigate on her own. She navigated the hall leading to Alexander's private office, a domain she rarely intruded upon. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar, and inside she heard her husband speaking in hushed tones. She paused, heart pounding. This weekend, Alex's voice carried through the crack in the door. "I'll see if I can get away without raising suspicion." Serafina felt her stomach twist. Clutching her chest, she retreated, not wanting to hear more, not wanting to break entirely. She pressed a hand against the wall to steady herself. Quietly, she hurried back to her suite, each step echoing through corridors that seemed ominously still. Later that evening, as thunder rumbled across the sky, Alex mentioned an urgent business trip to New York. In the dimly lit dining room, he seemed uneasy, avoiding her eyes. Serafina's expression remained composed. She agreed with a gentle nod, but her heart was already formulating a plan. If Camille Davenport was indeed the cause of her husband's sudden secretiveness, Serafina intended to discover the truth and safeguard her child's future at any cost. Meanwhile, miles away in her chic Hollywood apartment, Camille fawned over the details of a lavish weekend getaway. She had convinced Alex to meet her at a private villa in Napa Valley, a place known for its romantic vineyards and million-dollar sunsets. In her mind, she was inches away from capturing Alex completely. Once that happened, she believed Serafina's days in Alex's life would be numbered. In the same breath of excitement, Camille also faced a flicker of impatience. Would Alexander actually leave his wife, the celebrated Serafina Montgomery, to start a new life with her? She had invested so much in this pursuit, time, energy, even her own moral qualms. The more she leaned into this twisted relationship, the more she demanded a return on her investment. The skies outside the Montgomery mansion crackled with a fresh wave of thunder. Little did any of them realize that this storm was only the beginning. The stage was set for revelations and confrontations that would test the boundaries of love, loyalty, and one woman's unrelenting thirst for power. Serafina's trust in Alexander was crumbling by the hour. In an effort to find solace and perhaps clarity, she confided in her best friend, Vanessa Stein, who was among the few people Serafina still trusted implicitly. They met for lunch at the Polo Lounge in the Beverly Hills Hotel, an old haunt of Serafina's modeling days. The noise of clinking glasses and polite conversation provided a discreet background for a deeply personal discussion. "This can't go on," V. Serafina said, swirling her iced tea listlessly. "I've tried confronting him, but he insists it's all in my head. I can't ignore the evidence anymore. He's so distant, so secretive." Vanessa reached out and squeezed Serafina's hand gently. "You're certain there's another woman?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Serafina nodded. "Yes. The way he avoids my questions. The late-night phone calls, the urgent business trips. It's all a pattern." Vanessa pursed her lips in disapproval. "You deserve better. Especially now you need to think about your child's future. Have you considered hiring a private investigator? Just to confirm your suspicions." Though the thought had crossed her mind, Serafina hesitated. She felt a surge of anger mixed with shame. Was this really the life she had signed up for, a marriage overshadowed by suspicion and espionage? Meanwhile, Alexander's corporate world provided him with a convenient alibi. Meetings, acquisitions, and mergers consumed him. He told Serafina he was flying to New York to discuss a new real estate partnership with Jonathan Ralston, a renowned developer. It was half true. A deal was indeed on the table, but the real impetus for the trip was to carve out time for Camille, who had demanded a grand romantic gesture. While preparations for the business trip commenced, Alexander found himself plagued by pangs of guilt. He often replayed his wedding vows in his head, seeing Serafina in her luminous white gown, beaming with a love that once felt unbreakable. On certain nights, he fought the urge to confess everything, just to unburden the heaviness in his heart. Yet each time he recalled Camille's captivating smile, the thrill she ignited, and his resolve to preserve the status quo held firm. Camille, on her end, sensed Alexander's guilt and used it to her advantage. Late-night texts with sweet nothings, or sometimes strategic panic about her financial woes, worked wonders to keep him wrapped around her finger. The mere mention of a mounting credit card debt or an overdue rent check was enough to see thousands of dollars wired to her bank account. She fashioned herself as the damsel in distress, and Alexander played the knight in shining armor. The dynamic fueled her confidence. Soon she believed she would persuade him to sever ties with Serafina altogether. As Serafina finished lunch with Vanessa, she decided to pursue a quiet, methodical approach. If her husband refused to be honest, then she would unearth the truth herself. The seeds of doubt had been firmly planted, and they were sprouting into something far darker, a determination that if this mistress in white intended to steal her millionaire husband, Serafina would wear her own shade of black to bury them both. Napa Valley stretched out in rows of lush green vineyards, dotted with grand estates that shimmered under the early summer sun. On a secluded property perched on a gentle hill, Camille paced the veranda of a rented villa, her figure cloaked in a white linen sundress. She adored the symbolism. White was the color of innocence, of brides of new beginnings. It was also in her mind the perfect camouflage for someone with decidedly impure intentions. Alexander had promised to join her by late afternoon, claiming that he'd convinced his business associates of a short holiday to clear his head. In truth, he used the partial business trip to slip away from Serafina. Without drawing suspicion, Camille had prepared everything: a gourmet meal delivered by a private chef, an array of fine wines, and meticulously curated background music. She wanted this getaway to be etched in Alexander's memory as the moment he realized he could not live without her. As the sun dipped lower, the roar of an approaching car engine announced Alex's arrival. He stepped out wearing casual chinos and a crisp-collared shirt, a stark difference from his usual tailored suits. His face lit up when he saw Camille. For a moment, he allowed himself to be wholly captivated by her relaxed elegance. She glided toward him, the breeze catching her hair in a sunlit halo, offering him the sort of enthusiastic greeting he rarely received at home these days. They shared dinner on the veranda overlooking the gentle slopes of the vineyard, glasses of Cabernet. Sauvignon glinted like garnets in their hands. As the sun set, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, they talked about Alex's dreams, his regrets, the pressures he faced. Camille listened intently, interjecting just enough to keep him going, to make him feel understood and valued. In her presence, Alex felt like a man unburdened. Later, as night embraced the vineyard and cicadas began their nocturnal chorus, they moved inside. The villa was decorated in a Tuscan style, with warm terracotta hues, large wooden beams, and soft candlelight flickering against the walls. Camille, still in her white dress, looked almost ethereal in the golden glow. In a moment of raw passion, Alex pulled her close, tangling his fingers in her hair. A part of him whispered that this was wrong, that it was disloyal, that Serafina, his pregnant wife, deserved better. But the whisper grew faint against the overpowering intoxication Camille provided. Outside shadows lengthened over the vineyards, as if nature itself disapproved of the union forming behind closed doors. If Alex and Camille had been more attentive, they might have noticed a distant figure lurking near the perimeter of the property, someone determined to record exactly what was transpiring within. Fate was already in motion, setting the stage for a confrontation that would cut through the facade of innocence that Camille so carefully cultivated. The white dress might symbolize purity, but in the darkness, its brightness served as a beacon, drawing attention to all the hidden sins of those who wore it. Back in Los Angeles, Serafina faced her own storm. Determined to confirm Alexander's betrayal, she had quietly hired a private investigator named Lucas O'Malley, a discreet but ruthless professional known for unveiling skeletons hidden behind gilded walls. With refined manners and a clinical approach, Lucas agreed to tail Alexander and gather proof of his extramarital affair. The day after Alex's supposed business trip began, Lucas traced his flight records and discovered a suspicious detour to Northern California, nowhere near New York. Tailored in an understated navy blazer, Lucas traveled up to Napa Valley and located the secluded villa. He spent hours parked at a vantage point, watching the comings and goings through powerful binoculars. It didn't take long before he saw Alexander greeting a woman in white, a woman who looked nothing like Serafina. A high-resolution camera captured images of Alex and Camille sharing what was clearly more than just a friendly embrace. The private detective even overheard snippets of conversation as he moved stealthily closer. Talk of future plans murmured sweet nothings, and conspicuous mentions of Serafina as an obstacle. By sunset, Lucas had all the incriminating evidence he needed. Serafina's phone buzzed with an incoming call that night. She had been lying awake in the dark, her pregnancy making it difficult to find a comfortable sleeping position. She answered, heart-pounding, knowing full well who it would be. "It's Lucas," said the low voice on the other end. "I have what you asked for." Serafina felt both relief and dread surge in her chest. "I see. How bad is it?" Lucas hesitated before replying. "Let's just say he's definitely not alone. I have photos and a brief video clip. You'll want to see them in person." Serafina's voice wavered slightly. "Then let's meet tomorrow. Text me the place." After the call ended, she pressed a trembling hand to her abdomen, where her baby kicked gently. Tears stung her eyes. This was no longer mere speculation. Her suspicions had been affirmed. She was carrying Alexander's child while he was gallivanting with another woman. Betrayal and heartbreak mingled with a new, startling sense of purpose. She swore in that moment that she would not be a victim in her own marriage. If Alexander was giving his mistress the kind of attention and devotion that should rightfully be hers, Serafina would make sure that both of them faced the consequences. At dawn, as the sun broke over the Los Angeles horizon, Serafina prepared to meet Lucas dressing in a chic black outfit. She studied her reflection in the mirror. Normally, she would never wear all black during the day, but something in her demanded it, a symbolic statement. Perhaps. If Camille wore white to steal her husband, Serafina would wear black to bury the illusions and deceit that threatened her family. She was done waiting passively for her husband to come to his senses. Now it was her turn to take control of the narrative, and she intended to play her part with the same poise that once made her a world-class model. Serafina sipped her cappuccino in a quiet corner of a discreet cafe in Brentwood, waiting for Lucas O'Malley. Morning rays filtered through the large windows, illuminating her black ensemble. Her posture was erect, her face an unreadable mask of calm. The only sign of her internal turmoil was the faint tremble of her hand as she lifted the coffee cup to her lips. Lucas arrived right on time, sliding into the seat across from her with a black leather briefcase in tow. His eyes flickered with professional sympathy. He had done this many times, delivering proofs of infidelity to broken spouses. "These are the documents," he said, placing a sealed folder on the table. Photos. Time-stamped, Serafina's eyes never left the folder. Carefully she opened it, flipping through each image, Alexander and Camille holding hands, sipping wine, and even sharing a kiss on the villa's veranda. The last photo was the hardest blow, Alexander leaning in to whisper in Camille's ear, while she giggled in response. It felt like watching her marriage crumple before her eyes. "Thank you," Serafina said quietly. Her voice was steady, even if her heart wasn't. Lucas leaned in, lowering his voice. "I can gather more evidence if you need. Their location, financial transactions, anything that could help if you're considering a divorce or settlement." Serafina paused. She thought of her unborn child, her marriage vows, and the empire. Alexander had built an empire. She was partly responsible for having stood by him through countless sacrifices. "I need more than just pictures," she finally said, her eyes cold with resolve. "I want to know everything about her, where she lives, her finances, her history. I also want to know who else she's been involved with. If she thinks she can waltz in and destroy my family, I'll make sure she doesn't leave unscathed." Lucas nodded, slipping out a notepad. "I'll start digging right away over the next 2 weeks." Lucas worked tirelessly, sending Serafina daily updates. The deeper he went, the clearer Camille's motives became. Bank statements showed hefty deposits arriving from older men whose names rang with wealth and power. Camille also carried sizable credit card debt, often paid off suddenly by mysterious benefactors. A consistent pattern emerged. She targeted wealthy individuals, formed quick, intense bonds, and extracted large sums of money before moving on to the next mark. To Serafina, it wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about protecting her future, her child's inheritance, and her own dignity. If Alexander was blind to Camille's cunning, Serafina was not. She decided it was time to face her husband directly, but not in the manner he would expect. Instead of playing the wounded victim, she would orchestrate a scenario so precise that neither Alexander nor Camille could deny the consequences. She envisioned the confrontation in vivid detail, an unveiling of her evidence, a demonstration of the mistress's duplicity, and the final moment when Alexander realized the full scope of his betrayal. In that moment, Serafina would decide whether to salvage her marriage or walk away with everything she was owed. Her black attire, once a simple stylistic choice, had become a signal of her unwavering determination. She was mourning the illusion of innocence, but she was far from defeated. The Montgomery estate buzzed with heightened tension on the evening Serafina chose to set her plan in motion. She had instructed the staff to prepare a small dinner for Alexander's return, the kind of intimate setting that used to rekindle their romance. After weeks of secrecy, he arrived home, looking exhausted and strangely a bit apprehensive. Perhaps guilt had finally begun to weigh on him more heavily. Serafina met him at the door, wearing an elegant black gown, one that clung to her pregnant figure, like a dark, regal cloak. As she glided toward him, Alexander forced a faint smile. He leaned in for a perfunctory kiss, but she pulled back subtly, leading him instead to the dining room. Inside the table was set for 2 candles, flickering against polished silverware. "Dinner. That's a nice surprise," Alexander said, loosening his tie. He tried to read Serafina's expression, but her features remained inscrutable. They made small talk through the first course. Alexander's eyes flickered around, as if expecting something: questions, accusations, a mention of the rumored mistress. When dessert arrived, a rich chocolate mousse, Serafina cleared her throat. "I have something to show you, Alexander," she said, quietly, withdrawing her phone. His face blanched as she opened an image gallery. Photo after photo flashed by him and Camille at the villa, walking hand in hand, locked in intimate embraces. The color drained from his cheeks. He made no attempt to deny the obvious Serafina. He began, his voice quavering. She raised a hand to silence him. "Don't lie to me anymore. I know her name is Camille Davenport. I know everything about your affair, and I have the receipts to prove it." Alexander's eyes darted around, looking for an exit from the crushing reality. I was going to tell you," he stammered. Serafina leveled him with a cold stare. "When, after our child was born, after she bankrupted you, or maybe when she moved into my home," he bowed his head, shame dripping from every angle of his posture. "I never meant for it to go this far." Serafina's voice was steady as steel. "But it did. And now we need to decide what happens next." At that moment, there was a buzz from the front intercom. The butler stepped into the dining room, clearing his throat. "Mr. Montgomery, a guest is here to see you. She says it's urgent." Serafina's lips curved into a knowing smile. "That would be Camille. I invited her." Alexander's eyes widened in panic. "Serafina, what are you doing?" She stood smoothing her black gown. "We're going to have a little chat, the three of us." Within minutes, Camille entered the mansion's grand foyer, dressed conspicuously in a white cocktail dress. She flashed a confident smile, but it faltered when she saw Serafina standing beside Alexander. For a split second, Camille seemed as if she might bolt. Yet her ambition compelled her to stay. She had come this far, and she believed she could still manipulate the situation. Serafina gestured to the living room, the silence thick with unspoken threats. Shall we thus began the confrontation that would either redeem or destroy them all. The Montgomery estate was a masterpiece of architecture and decor. But on this night, its elegance did nothing to soothe the charged atmosphere within. The expansive living room, typically a space of quiet grandeur, with its cream-toned sofas, abstract art pieces, and cascading crystal chandelier, had become an arena. Every inch of polished marble, every flicker of candlelight reflected the tension mounting between three very different people bound together by betrayal. Serafina stood tall near the stone fireplace, her black silk gown flowing like a shadow around her feet, her pregnant belly both a symbol of vulnerability and quiet power. She looked statuesque, regal, like a queen about to hand down judgment. Across the room, Alexander lingered near the grand piano, visibly shaken, his normally composed face marred by exhaustion and panic, and in the entryway, dressed in a white cocktail dress that now seemed jarringly inappropriate, stood Camille Davenport, confident, calculating, and increasingly out of her depth. Camille had entered the estate expecting something very different. She imagined Alexander would defend her, maybe even admit his unhappiness, and choose her. She had envisioned a dramatic confrontation. Yes, but one in which she emerged victorious. Instead, what she found was a woman who was not broken but composed. A woman who had already seen the truth and planned every move accordingly. Camille Davenport, Serafina, said, her voice as calm and sharp as cut glass. "So glad you could join us." Camille's smile faltered. "Serafina," she said cautiously, glancing at Alexander, "I didn't know you'd be here." "Oh, I'm sure you didn't," Serafina replied coolly. "But that's the thing about homes. You can never be sure who's waiting on the other side of the door." Alexander cleared his throat, stepping forward as if to mediate. "Maybe we should all sit down, no?" Serafina said without looking at him. "We'll stand. This won't take long." Camille tried to recover some ground, straightening her spine and putting on the practiced charm that had seduced more than one wealthy man. "I didn't come here to cause trouble. Alex and I. We just need to talk. Alone. Alone." Serafina echoed. She turned toward her husband. "Do you still want to be alone with her, Alexander? After everything you've seen, everything I've shown you." Alexander looked like a man aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "No, I don't know what I want right now." Serafina turned back to Camille. "He's not the only one who's been doing some soul-searching." Camille shifted uneasily. "I don't understand what this is about." "Let me help," Serafina said. She walked to a nearby side table and lifted a slim, dark folder. She opened it and pulled out several photographs, holding one up for Camille to see. It was a photo of her and Alexander at the villa in Napa, wine in hand, his fingers brushing her cheek. Camille's breath caught. Another photo followed the two of them, kissing under the string lights of the veranda. Then another, her lounging poolside in her white dress, while Alexander brought her a drink. "You've been followed," Camille hissed, fury rising. "Documented." Serafina corrected. "You're quite photogenic. I'll give you that. And consistent. You used the same tactics with Harold Vaughan, didn't you? And Richard Bellamy before that." Camille's jaw clenched. "You went through my past. I had someone go through it for me." Serafina replied, "A very thorough investigator. We traced everything, your financial records, your online aliases, even your applications to private dating services. You left a trail, Camille. And now it's caught up with you." Alexander turned toward Camille, his voice hollow. "Is that true? You did this to other men?" Camille tried to laugh it off, but it came out brittle. "They were lonely like you. I gave them something they needed. It's not a crime to connect with people. It is when you defraud them," Serafina said icily. "We have copies of the wire, transfers, screenshots of your messages and statements from at least 2 of your former lovers who are ready to talk to the police." Camille's voice broke suddenly shrill. "You're trying to paint me like some criminal." "You did that yourself," Serafina replied. "But tonight isn't about your criminal history. It's about what you did to my family. You thought you could come into my life, wrap yourself in white like some tragic heroine, and steal what was mine. But I don't play the victim. Camille, I never have." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Camille looked around the room, her poise unraveling. The warmth of the chandelier now seemed harsh, unforgiving, like a spotlight revealing every imperfection she'd tried to hide. "Do you really think you can erase me from his life with a few photographs?" Camille challenged, her voice cracking. "He loves me. He said so." Serafina looked at Alexander, who flinched as if burned. "Do you?" Serafina asked him softly. "Do you love her?" Alexander opened his mouth, but no words came. Finally he looked down and shook his head slowly. "I was lost. She made it easy to forget things for a while, but love. No, I don't think it ever was. The final blow." Camille's face collapsed. "You coward!" She spat tears, threatening to fall. "You used me." Alexander didn't reply. Serafina stepped closer, her voice low but unwavering. "You will leave this house, Camille, and if you ever contact Alexander again, or even so much as breathe near our family, I will bury you in legal filings. Fraud, extortion, identity, manipulation. Your name will be scorched earth." "You don't scare me," Camille muttered. But the defiance was gone. "Then you're a fool," Serafina replied. Camille clutched her purse, spun on her heel, and stalked toward the door. Her white dress flared as she moved, a once innocent symbol now reduced to a flag of defeat. When the door slammed shut behind her, silence filled the room again. Alexander stood frozen, his shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Serafina." She turned to him slowly, eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "Sorry doesn't erase what you did, but it's a start." He nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes. I know," she said softly. "But first you'll do nothing. You'll give me space, time and respect." Under the chandelier, their eyes locked. Not with love, not yet, but with recognition. A battlefield cleared, a reckoning complete. The mistress was gone, the illusions had shattered, and now the wife would decide what came next. The tension in the air reached a crescendo so thick it felt suffocating. Camille's eyes darted between Serafina's unyielding glare and Alexander's haunted expression. She had hoped that by confronting Serafina directly, she could somehow sow discord or confusion, maybe even force Alexander to defend her. Instead, she found herself nakedly exposed with no shield to hide behind. Alexander spoke at last, his voice trembling. "Camille, is this true? Did you do all of this to me?" A hysterical laugh escaped her. "And what about you, Alex? You're the one who pursued me just as much as I pursued you. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy every moment." Serafina cut in. "And what exactly did you enjoy?" Alexander. "Sneaking around behind my back while I carry your child." Her voice cracked just enough to reveal the heartbreak beneath her icy composure. Alexander turned to Serafina, eyes welling with regret. "I'm sorry. I was weak and I let things get out of hand." "Weak is an understatement." Serafina snapped. Tears glistened in her eyes but didn't fall. She swallowed the lump in her throat, fighting for the strength she needed to finish this. "The question now is whether there's anything left to salvage. I'm carrying your child, Alex, the child you pledged to care for. The child whose future you were so willing to jeopardize for a fling." Camille squared her shoulders, desperate to regain some ground. "You're acting like you never had problems. Alex told me you two barely spoke, that you were more interested in your charity events and photo shoots than your own husband." Serafina raised an eyebrow. "You have no idea how marriage works. Do you? We've weathered challenges far more daunting than you but you." She turned her gaze to Alexander, voice trembling with anger and sorrow. "You brought this viper into our home." Alexander stared at the floor, speechless. In that moment, he understood the magnitude of the betrayal, how it wasn't just about sleeping with Camille. It was about jeopardizing the very foundation of trust that held his marriage together, and by extension, the stable family, Serafina, and he had hoped to build for their child. Serafina looked at the ring on her finger, a symbol of vows once believed to be unbreakable. The diamond sparkled under the chandelier, mocking her with its eternal luster. She took a shaky breath. "Here's what's going to happen. Camille will leave now. If she ever contacts you again, I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure she faces the full weight of legal consequences for blackmail and fraud." "Legal consequences," Camille whispered, her bravado diminishing by the second yes. Serafina replied, her tone razor-sharp. "Alexander may have been foolish enough to fund your lifestyle, but I guarantee he has better lawyers than you could ever afford." For a moment, Camille seemed poised to retaliate, to lash out in a final act of desperation. But the futility was clear. She snatched her purse and stormed toward the door, white dress swirling around her legs, the final vestige of her illusions. As she disappeared into the night, the mistress in white had never looked more defeated. Alexander and Serafina stood in the living room, the chandelier overhead casting long shadows. They both knew their marriage would never be the same. Now the question was, would they choose to rebuild or bury what remained? In the days that followed, Alexander lived in a fog of self-recrimination. The affair became a spectre that haunted every corner of the Montgomery estate. Serafina refused to share a bed with him, choosing instead to sleep in the guest suite. He could hear her restless movements through the walls, each muffled footstep a reminder of the chasm he had created. Their once bustling mansion now felt empty, weighed down by guilt and silent anger. Meanwhile, Camille's departure seemed permanent. No desperate calls or text messages came from her. Alexander wasn't sure if she had left Los Angeles or was simply lying low. But one thing was certain: the swirl of excitement that once lured him had curdled into regret. Serafina found herself in a whirlwind of emotions: fury, heartbreak, relief that she had confronted the issue, and an unyielding determination not to be a victim. Even as her belly grew rounder, she threw herself into philanthropic work, organizing a charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton to raise funds for underprivileged mothers. The irony wasn't lost on her. She, too, was an expectant mother, grappling with financial complexities of her own. If Alexander chose divorce, she knew a bitter legal battle loomed. Yet she proceeded with unwavering grace, refusing to crumble before the public or her social circle. Alexander tried in his own stumbling way to make amends. He wrote heartfelt letters, left flowers at her bedroom door, even spoke to a couples therapist about potential steps to repair the damage. But Serafina remained distant. She agreed to therapy sessions, if only to see if they could find any salvageable remnants of their former love. Their first therapy session, held in a private office in Westwood, was emotionally excruciating. Serafina confronted Alexander about the depths of betrayal, refusing to allow him to gloss over his actions. He in turn opened up about feeling neglected and unfulfilled emotions that neither of them had properly addressed before. Though the conversation was painful, it opened a channel of communication that had been sealed shut for far too long. Weeks passed, bringing them closer to the baby's due date. Serafina's doctor appointments were frequent, her mood oscillating between cautious optimism and deep-seated hurt. Alexander accompanied her each time, clinging to the hope that he could still be a father his child deserved, and perhaps a husband worthy of forgiveness. At one such appointment, they heard the baby's heartbeat through the ultrasound machine. The thumping rhythm filled the room, resonating with such clarity that it momentarily dissolved their hostility. Serafina's eyes filled with tears, and Alexander gently reached for her hand. She allowed the contact, though she did not squeeze back. In that fleeting moment, both realized that life was bigger than their mistakes. Whether they chose to rebuild their marriage or to part ways, they were irrevocably bound by the heartbeat, echoing through the monitor, an innocent new life that deserved a stable future. It was a glimmer of hope, fragile yet luminous, hinting that perhaps not everything was lost. Months later, the Montgomery estate welcomed a new occupant, a healthy baby boy named Gabriel. The final weeks of Serafina's pregnancy had been a dance of reconciliation and unresolved tensions. Alexander, determined to support his wife through the birth, had put every effort into regaining her trust, attending therapy sessions, shutting down any avenues of contact with Camille, and pouring his focus on Serafina's well-being. On a mild afternoon in late spring, Gabriel came into the world wailing with the robust cry of a newborn determined to live. The delivery room witnessed the first tentative step toward rebuilding a family shattered by betrayal. Alexander's face lit up with awe as he held his son, tears streaming down his cheeks. Meanwhile, Serafina felt a complex mix of emotions, overwhelming love for her child, and a cautious acknowledgement of Alexander's presence in the room. Once mother and baby were stable, the pair returned to the mansion. Warm sunlight streamed through the nursery's bay windows, illuminating pastel walls decorated with whimsical illustrations of forest creatures. Serafina rocked Gabriel gently, humming a lullaby that had once been sung to her by her own mother. Alexander stood at a respectful distance, knowing every gesture carried weight in this fragile new beginning. Though they lived under the same roof, the question of their marriage lingered, The therapy sessions had helped them face underlying issues. Alexander's hunger for excitement, Serafina's deep sense of betrayal, and the need for open communication. Yet trust, once broken, cannot be swiftly mended. They agreed to live as co-parents, for now focusing on Gabriel, while deciding if love could be rekindled or if their paths should diverge. As for Camille Davenport, she remained a spectre on the outskirts of their consciousness. Alexander received a single email from her months after their confrontation, a cryptic message about what could have been, and a half-hearted apology for the pain caused. He deleted it without replying. Rumor had it that she moved to Miami, forging connections with another circle of wealthy men. Lucas O'Malley's thorough report, however, had been quietly passed to some of Camille's previous victims, ensuring her manipulative patterns would not go unnoticed again. Serafina, now dressed in softer, comforting colors for her child's sake, occasionally reflected on her choice to wear black on that fateful night. She was not mourning her marriage, she realized, but the illusions that once veiled her life. In shedding those illusions, she had found the strength to stand on her own. Whether Alexander deserved a second chance would be a decision she'd arrive at, on her terms in her own time. In the lull of early evening, baby Gabriel stirred in his crib, Serafina, and Alexander both moved to tend to him, catching each other's gaze. In the hush that followed, they shared a semblance of unity, two flawed individuals bound by their child's innocence, forging a path forward, even as shadows of the past lingered. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained, reminding them that every relationship is a delicate balance between forgiveness, loyalty, and the capacity to heal. In the end, the mistress's white dress was no match for the wife's unwavering resolve cloaked in black. Alexander's moment of weakness nearly cost him everything but redemption. If it comes at all, demands accountability. Serafina's strength carried her through heartbreak and betrayal, lighting the way for a new life, and perhaps a new start for a family forever changed. As for you, dear viewers and listeners, remember that even in the darkest shadows, truth and resilience can blaze a path to renewal. Will Alexander and Serafina's marriage stand the test of time, or will they part ways for good? Only time will tell. If you found yourself hooked by this emotional roller coaster filled with secrets, heartbreak, and hard-won lessons, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next dramatic tale. Thank you for watching.